Welcome to a super low production value talk through of the Bill of Rights by me, Mr. Boeve. Hope you're having a good one. As good as you can be here, stuck at home. I am in my basement. I was going to put up some cool documents in the background, things like the 19th Amendment replica, 100th year anniversary this year. I've got a copy replica of Common Sense by Thomas Paine. We've talked about that in class. This is an article written by John Peter Zenger. It's a really good example of freedom of the press in America. Star Spangled Banner replica of the original. We got a big old version of the Gettysburg Address I was going to put right behind. Couldn't do it. And of course, Declaration of Independence. But again, tape and basement walls don't mix. So you've got me and my basement freezer. I'm going to talk through the Bill of Rights with you today. Bill of Rights is super interesting. It relates to what we're talking about with the Constitutional Convention because it's actually a major sticking point and a major argument between Federalists and Anti-Federalists. Many of the Federalists thought that a Bill of Rights wasn't necessary, which is kind of silly to think about because all the states with the Articles of Confederation, when they had their own state governments, they all had Declaration of Rights. Even before the Declaration of Independence, Virginia had their Virginia Declaration of Rights. And so when they write this US Constitution in 1787 and they finish it on September 17th, they had no Declaration of Rights. The Federalists, who liked the Constitution, said, yeah, we don't really need a Bill of Rights because it doesn't say the government can take those rights. It doesn't say the government can infringe upon your freedom of speech. It doesn't say the government can take away your right to bear arms. But the Anti-Federalists did not buy that argument. They really wanted a Bill of Rights because it would guarantee that the government wouldn't abuse their power. And so, in a compromise, the Constitution was full of them. Remember the Great Compromise and the Three-Fifths Compromise, and frankly, the whole thing's a series of compromises. How long will the president serve? How do you elect the president? All of these things are compromises. The Bill of Rights is basically a compromise to get the Anti-Federalist support for the Constitution. So the Bill of Rights is passed in 1791. There's actually 12 amendments. You probably can't read those all. Go ahead, real quick. Okay. 12. Two of them don't pass. Two of them pass Congress, but not the states. Those two have to do with representation in Congress, a representative for how many people, and the other one has to do with changing congressional pay, which interestingly, it doesn't pass in 1791, but fast forward 200 years to 1992, and a version of it passes, and it's actually our 27th Amendment today. But we're not talking about that. We are talking about the Bill of Rights today. So here we go. Amendment number 1, the First Amendment. We've talked about it. You've heard about it. The first part says, Congress shall make no law establishing a religion. So part of it says that Congress can't make a national religion. It then goes on to list 5 additional freedoms. Those freedoms, you know, they are freedom of the press, freedom of speech, of course, freedom of religion, assembly, and to petition for a redress of grievances. And in the last 200 plus years, we've added a bunch more stuff to this. We talk about a freedom of expression. What we're doing right now, the founding fathers would have never thought about. And so the video and art and all of these things that aren't specifically mentioned, they kind of fall underneath the First Amendment. Again, those 5 First Amendment freedoms: religion, speech, press, assembly, petition. Amendment number 2, the right to bear arms. We don't need to get into it. People argue about what it actually means. We don't need to do that for our purposes. In general, you have a right to bear arms. Third Amendment, no one argues about. In fact, it's something that has never gone in front of the Supreme Court. No one's ever brought a case that far. It is the idea that we have the right to be free from the quartering of soldiers during peacetime. No soldiers are going to knock on your door and ask you to house them for a while. The Fourth Amendment, much more interesting. The Fourth Amendment, we might infer a right to privacy. It is basically that you have the protection from the government from illegal searches and seizures. A signed warrant needs to be in place for law enforcement to come search your house. The Fifth Amendment has a bunch of stuff in it. The Fifth Amendment we often hear with, I plead the Fifth, which is what you would do in court if you do not want to incriminate yourself and you don't want to lie because that's perjury. So the Fifth Amendment is the right against self-incrimination. It also includes things like double jeopardy, which is a fun one. You can't be convicted of the same crime twice. I mean, if you do it 2 different times, you could, but they're not going to convict you of the same thing and punish you 2 different times. Also in there is the right to due process, a right to a grand jury indictment, which is basically if you're standing trial for a big enough crime, a grand jury has to have this indictment. They have to be presented with the evidence. It's kind of like this pretrial to the trial. You have that right if it's a big enough thing you're being charged with. You also, in the Fifth Amendment, have this right to eminent domain, which basically means that if the government's going to take your property, they will give you just compensation. Sixth Amendment is the right to a speedy and public trial. It is the right to confront witnesses. And it's these procedural rights that we talk about. Some of the Miranda rights come from the Sixth Amendment. It's a procedural one if you are accused or frankly, if you're guilty of a crime. Seventh Amendment is the right to a jury in a civil case of $20 or more. I don't think we follow the $20 or more anymore, but essentially a civil case is where one person sues someone else. You'll see this often with breach of contract, insurance issues, those kind of things, where a law wasn't necessarily broken, but someone is suing someone else for damages. Eighth Amendment also is for those who are accused or guilty of a crime, frankly. It is the right to be free from excessive bail. So if you commit a minor crime, they can't set your bail, this amount of money to get you out of jail, at some unreasonable number. You steal a candy bar from the store, they can't set bail at $3 billion. In that Eighth Amendment, you also find no excessive fines. Again, if you get found guilty of stealing that candy bar, they can't fine you $3 billion. The other thing in the Eighth Amendment, a lot of Supreme Court cases have dealt with this one over the years, is this no cruel and unusual punishment. So that's a big one. We've talked about that in this country with capital punishment. We've talked about that with techniques that law enforcement use, all of that kind of stuff. And again, if we have time this semester, we'll go into some more depth and examples with all of these. I have lots of examples. I have lots of books about the Bill of Rights, good fun case studies about the Bill of Rights and the old living Constitution text. So we've got stuff we can talk about if we have time this semester. 2 more amendments are these kind of overarching amendments. The first is the Ninth Amendment. The Ninth Amendment basically says you've got more rights. The acknowledgement that no one can list all of the rights that you have. I have the right to wear this U of M shirt today. Go Blue. I have the right to do a lot of things that aren't listed in the Bill of Rights. And so it's this acknowledgement that there's a lot more rights out there. The 10th Amendment is one that the Anti-Federalists really liked. It essentially said that if the national government isn't given the power to do it, that the states have the power, or the people is what the amendment says. So the 10th Amendment reserves powers to states and the people. The 9th Amendment, again, is about rights to the people. The 8th is about cruel and unusual punishment and excessive fines and bail. The 7th is about a jury case in a jury trial in a civil case. The 6th Amendment is procedural rights, speedy and public trial. 5th Amendment is no self-incrimination, double jeopardy, and that thing about eminent domain. 4th Amendment is no unreasonable searches and seizures. 3rd Amendment, no quartering of soldiers. Don't forget that one. 2nd Amendment, right to bear arms. And the 5 freedoms found in the First Amendment. Freedom of press, assembly, religion. I missed one. Religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. There you go. There's the 5. Hope that was helpful. I hope hearing the amendments is going to help you memorize them a little better. I think you should memorize them, A, because it's this constitutional compromise. B, you should know your rights to be a good citizen. So you'll be tested on that coming up soon. So Hope you wrote those down. Hope you're studying. Um, hope you're managing this time as best you can. Have a good one. I'll see you soon.